You know, there are people who think, in my field of bioethics, that it should be subject to a new set of rules, a new set of guidelines. And I am agnostic about this. We have a very strong um, oversight system for recombinant DNA technology called the RAC, the Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee. And I'm a member of the RAC, just starting in September, and my new first term. And I will know more about how those regulatory systems will work after I spend some time thinking and reflecting on that experience. But historically, when we set up the RAC to think about the manipulation of DNA, does there need to be yet another version of that? Is there something new, or could it fall within the same regulatory guidelines? What sorts of power do you want, and how much should be external and how much should be internal? I've always thought, and have long put forward the idea, that what needs to happen is that every lab, some new, different idea of training takes hold. And I've called this the Jedi Knight theory, which is tremendous power and tremendous responsibility, that people have to, when they become scientists, take care of one another. Take care of one another. The Greeks had an idea about this, about the notion of care for one another, care for the self and care for the other, being part of the task of becoming human, was to surround yourself with other people who were true friends. Aristotle talks about this. So this notion of being with people who could push you towards your best self has long been a part of what philosophy thinks is important about the human condition. But in science, it could have a particular weight, and synthetic biology as well. You're undergraduates. Everybody in NUiGEM are undergraduates. So when the point you enter into the field, if you begin to develop a cohort, a partner who would then stay with you for all of your life. Perhaps it's when you enter graduate school, your first SynBio lab, and you begin to have responsibility. You have someone who you go through with, who you have to sit and say, what's happening to you? What's happening here? If the lab has to come back together on a regular basis for self-reflection and for self-review, are we maintaining the standards? What are our missions? What are our standards? These are deep internal structures, which are already there in science to some extent, I think could be strengthened and used to raise the question of how to make good moral agents. So I'm less concerned with, do you know the checklist of rules? Are you nice to human subjects, and can you check those forms off? And I'm much more concerned when you are alone in the lab and nobody else is there, how and why are you a good moral agent? And how do you think about that question? What does it mean to be a good scientist? When you're all alone and no one can see you, do I still have to tell always the truth? And why is that? And that deep internal struggle has to start, I believe, at the undergraduate level with that question. What does it mean to be good? And what does it mean to be free? And what does it mean to be human? And what is a good scientist? And those questions take some time to consider. And you're not the first people that have thought this. It's been a long discussion from 500 years before the Common Era, when the Greeks were trying to put together the notion of the good person. And I find that discussion very coherent and very congruent with what it is to be a good scientist.